Right. So the theme for tonight on my talk is trying to talk about not so much agile, but well, agility, because I've been looking for it a lot, and I have to say it's hard to find sometimes. So this is really something that's a keen topic of mine that I really want to explore. So I'm gonna try and borrow from people, from clever people I've heard talk about that before, and try and put it all together and see where we get to. Um, now, just as a little introduction for me as well. So like Mike said, I work for Tesla, not Tesla, but Tesla is a computer software consultancy company based in Abingdon near Oxford. I've been there for 12 years almost, actually, not quite 11. Jack of all trades, I've done a bit of everything really. And I'm kind of one of Tesla's agile experts. So what do I do there? I do some kind of, I run training courses. I'm coaching teams, and I'm leading our agile community of practice. So through that kind of work, I have a lot of experience looking at what other teams do and what they struggle with, and that's what I'm going to try and share with you tonight, and hopefully we can have a discussion at the end. Now, for the little plug, self-advertisement here, I've got a YouTube channel where I'm trying to make videos to share my thoughts on agile stuff. It's called the Agile Broadcast. So it's a new sort of pet project of mine. But if you're interested, just have a look. You'll see I make videos like this where I try and draw on the screen and share my thoughts and explore concepts and things like that. So if you're interested, have a look. There's a link there. You can search on YouTube. You'll find it for sure. And also because it's a joint meetup tonight with Mike, so with Agile, but also with Agile Oxfordshire. I just thought I'll share with you here the fact that we also record the meetups, and they are all on YouTube. So if you want to catch up later on stuff, it's all on there, so you can have a look if you want to later. So now back to the talk. So I put this sign up because I mean, it might not be controversial. It depends what your feelings are on the stuff I'm going to talk about, but just a little warning that I'm going to probably try and push the boundaries a bit of what we consider acceptable, or let's say what we think is agile or what is not agile, etc. But I'm kind of doing that on purpose, right? And there's some of the things I'll say I'm actually sort of only half convinced myself. So bear with me here. I'm just sort of pushing the boundaries here of knowledge, right? Because this is how we learn, right? So I'm just trying to, it's a bit of a thought experiment. So just a word of warning, that's what's going to happen. Now, okay, so let's go into the meat of it, right? So you've probably heard this phrase before, right? That the idea of there's a doing agile and then there's the being agile, two very different things, right? So doing agile being the, that you do the practices, you do the stand-ups, you do the sprint reviews, etc. If you're doing Scrum, you adopt the practices and you do the mechanics, but you're not necessarily agile anyway. You don't necessarily have any agility. You're just doing the mechanics without really thinking about it. And then you have the being agile, where it's more about the mindset, the culture, etc. And this is a phrase that comes up a lot, right? If you Google this, you'll find lots of articles about this. It's a typical thing that comes up, right? And of course we strive to be agile rather than just do agile, right? But I want to explore this a bit more, right? What does it really mean, apart from what I just said? And I think so. If you imagine, right, that if we can plot the number of user stories, let's say, that you have in your backlog over time, and I see a lot of projects that are kind of look like this curve, right? Sorry, this way, where you have so no stories in your backlog right at the start, and then suddenly there'll be a big bunch of them because the product owner or maybe you have a business analyst or whoever suddenly is going to enter all of them in the tool, right? And so suddenly you have this curve increasing. You have a whole bunch of stories that have been put in right from the start, right? And then you have a fixed number of them. That's basically your scope, right? And then perhaps towards the end of the project, you've got a little bump because well, there's a few things you hadn't thought of or something, so there's a little increase at the very end, right? But it often really looks like this, right? And then in terms of development, you're trying to play catch up, right, with all the stories. and it might look like a straight line. I mean, it might not look like a straight line depending on time, but just for simplicity here, you know, let's imagine it's a straight line. So you're just catching up with all the stories that you have in your backlog. And I've seen backlogs, you know, that are just enormous, you know, with 300, 400, 500 stories. It's crazy how people can manage this, right? And as a product owner myself, in the past, you know, when you have that many stories, or BA even on a project, or even a developer, like it's really hard to navigate or make sense of 500 items or more in there. And here I would question, you know, where the agility is, right? If all those stories have been put in right at the start, you know, basically all the decision about what the project's going to be like has been all made up front, and then it becomes just this development activity where you want to catch up and try to be done on time and on budget. And of course, you'll be done when the red curve and the green curve when they align, right? When they join. But that's really hard to predict, as we know. So then you start to have like estimation troubles and trying to forecast things, and it becomes just difficult and a nightmare really to project manage these sort of things. So it becomes a race, right? And it's very hard to predict those things. So like I said, I'm questioning now where's the agility here. So okay, you might have some agility in terms of the execution of this thing. Like you have a project with a scope, and then you have some agility in terms of you can decide, you know, how you execute it, how you technically whether you make this decision or that decision. And that's good, but in terms of the design of the product, you know, it's already been thought through right from the start, and usually there's very little change there, right? There's no agility whatsoever, and it's something I see a lot, which bugs me like nothing else really in this world. So, and another thing I'm going to steal from Kevlin Henney. If you don't know him, he's a great conference speaker and trainer. Google him. There's lots of good stuff. And recently, I saw him say this thing like we know we are obsessed with story points and velocity. Right. This is what Scrum Masters tend to talk about a lot, right? Like what's the velocity for the sprints, and oh my gosh, the velocity has gone down. What's going on, etc. But really, if you go back at your you know, your physics class from when you were back at school or university, you know that velocity is not the same as speed, right? And really, we're not really measuring velocity; we're just measuring speed most of the time, right? It's how fast, how much stuff you do, right, in the sprint. So it's the measure of how much stuff you've developed within the time frame, which is really just speed, right? It's got nothing to do with what velocity is, which adds the direction, right? Are we going in the right direction? Are we building the right thing, right? So there's no point in being really fast, right, at building the wrong thing, right? You might be better going slower, but building the right thing, right? That's really what velocity is, and it's got nothing to do with speed, right? It's quite different. So again, I'm going in that path where I'm thinking, if we just talk about speed, right? There's no agility here. We just want to build more stuff faster, more stuff, potentially the wrong stuff, right? And that's clearly not a good thing. And it plays on the same idea from something that John Cutler came up with a few years back, this idea of the feature factory, right? Where you're just a factory of features. You're just churning features after features. You're just churning work. You know, you have the land of ideas, right? Where people are just guessing stuff, and then it lands on your lap as a development team, and then you just have to build stuff. And once it's done, you take the next one, and then you build that again. And it really feels like a factory, and you have no idea why you're building this thing. You don't really meet the users. You don't really even care about them. You don't know what they feel like, whether they like what you've developed or not. It's a really demotivating for the team, and a lot of people end up in that situation, right? In the feature factory thing, where speed becomes not velocity, right, but speed becomes the obsession in terms of project management practices. And you know, if you only care about just building stuff without having a vision or a clear product design, then you end up with this analogy that I came up with a few years ago, right? It's like how to build a rubbish playground, right? So, you know, you could have a list on the side with, you know, it must have secure enclosure, clear signage, you know, some seating, and a selection of play equipment. It should be green and yellow because they always are. and you could have a poultry theme with the toys, right? Like you have a nice prioritized list, right? That's a nice backlog. It looks prioritized. It have everything that you need, right? Everything that someone in the committee could come up with. But if you look at the picture on the left, I mean, it's not exactly an exciting playground, right? Nobody wants to play there, and in fact, in the picture, it's completely empty, right? It's just a rubbish playground. Look at it. There's nothing to play with. It's depressing, really. But you know, we've done everything that was on the backlog, right? We've project successful because we've delivered everything. It's a ground in which you can play with, right? So job done, next. But it's not exciting, right? So there's something missing here in terms of the design of the actual product, right? It was treated as a project, but the people forgot that there's a product to be had behind that needs to be actually exciting and inviting, and so that people want to use it. So this is the type of problem that I see a lot, right? And I could go on, right? There's a lot I could complain about. So, but I don't want this to be a big rant from me. So, with all the dark clouds, I'm just going to try and put some sunshine into this, and give you a bit of pointers, I think, of what I've seen over the years, and I think are really good ideas, and maybe controversial, like I said earlier, but we can have a discussion, right? So that's what I want to do here, right? So the first thing that really is important is this idea of outcome versus output, right? And you might have come across this before, and if you've listened to me speak, you might have before. You might have. It's a theme that I tend to talk about because it really, for me, really hits the nail, the hammer on the nail here. So output, right? Output being is the stuff you produce, right? It's the stuff you make. It's the features, the stories you produce, etc. So here in the coffee example, you know, the output is the cup of coffee itself that you've made, right? But the outcome, of course, is not the cup of coffee itself. It's the fact that you get benefit from it, right? Whatever that might be, whether it's the kick so that you don't fall asleep, or the fact that you actually like the taste, so you get a nice feeling from drinking it. But whatever it might be, there's some kind of benefit to you, right, from that output. So the output need to be really translate into an outcome at some point, right? And that's what we actually care about. That's what the users really care about, not the output themselves, right? I mean, of course, you can't have outcome without outputs, right? That seems obvious to say, but you know, you need the outputs, obviously. So I'm not saying forget the outputs, but the thing that actually matter is the outcome, right? And if we forget the outcome, we can just manage by output. Then you get the rubbish playground, right? That I shown before. So the outcome is really what we need to focus on in order to, you know, increase user satisfaction and have great products, right? And to motivate the team to work on great products. So here I'm arguing that you know, managing by outcome, or let's say being outcome driven, is a much better place to be than being output driven, right? Because if you're output driven, you obsess about speed, right? You obsess about backlog being done on time. You obsess about budget and things like that. And then you forget about the product that you're designing that needs to be a good product, like, you know. So but then the question becomes, you know, how do you do this, right? Because these are just words, you know, abstract words. The point is, how do you do this thing? Outcome is really hard to grasp, actually. So what do we do? Well, we have to change the questions we ask, right? Because often when I see like teams in sprint reviews and retrospectives and in any meeting, really, we always have this sort of questions about, are we on track? You know, how is the budget? Are we going to finish on time? What's the estimate? All this sort of delivery questions, which are important questions, I guess, but really nobody is asking the other question, the thing that I think we should be asking, which is, you know, did we deliver value? Did it, you know, what impact did they have on the business? Are users actually using the software? You know, I'm amazed when I see teams where they don't even know whether their users are using the stuff they've developed or not. It's crazy. It seems insane, but most people don't ask those questions. Are we building the right thing, right? These are crucial questions that we often don't ask, right? So there's a change of focus here and a change of mindset, right? And another point I've seen that I thought was a great point to make is this, right? That so good teams celebrate a release, and I see this a lot, right? Oh, we finished the sprint, or we finished this milestone, and we shipped it, and it didn't crash, you know. And of course they're happy about it, because it's, well, I don't want to trivialize that shipping something that you've worked on for months is nothing, but it doesn't really, it's not enough, right? It doesn't really tell you the whole story. It doesn't tell you that people loved it. It doesn't tell you that that it's useful to them. It doesn't tell you that it solved their problem, etc. So, you know, here's the phrase: good teams celebrate a release, but great teams celebrate a positive impact on the business, right? That's much more powerful. So when you see pictured on the left there, which is, I guess, from something I picked up from Slack, you know, where you have an automated message on Slack or whatever instant messaging system you have that says, hey, we've released it, successful, and then people click on, yeah, you know, celebration, we've released the thing. But it doesn't really mean all that much, right? Where compared to this email just here, right, where you get an email from a business user saying, hey, I've used the thing you released the other day, and it's amazing, I really love it, it really helps me and solve my problems. Now that's something to celebrate, right? Not the shipping really itself. It's just not enough, right? And I think one thing that often gets forgotten, right, so something more pragmatic if you're doing Scrum is, well, sprint goals. And it sounds silly because it's in the Scrum guide. It tells you must have a sprint goal. But if I remember, maybe, you know, 15 years ago or so, when I started with Scrum and stuff, and I saw this idea of sprint goals, and I frankly I did not really understand what that was for, because I was output oriented. So I thought, well, what's the sprint goal for? I mean, is the goal doing the things we said we would do? Like, what isn't the game to do the list of features that we plan for the sprint? Isn't that the goal? I don't understand why we have to write that down. I mean, isn't that obvious? So I really didn't get that, and it took me some time to think, oh, actually the sprint goal is outcome based, right? It's meant to say, what do we want to achieve from a business perspective or from a user perspective, right? Not here's a list of things we want to build or develop. That's not really a goal. That's just a list of tasks. That's just your to-do list, right? That's literally the sprint. So there's no point adding a goal to it. So the goal itself is an outcome that you want to reach, a capability that you want to give to the user, right? After that sprint, the user will be able to achieve something that he wasn't able to do before. That's the goal, right? And what John Cutler says on top of this is, you know, if you have a goal, then you don't need to play Tetris with your sprint planning. So when he says playing Tetris is, you know, you have this sprint container, which is, you know, 2 weeks or something, or whatever sprint length you have, and then people start to fill it. Okay, we have a sprint coming up, we need to fill it, right? So you start to fill it with a story, and then another, and then another, and then another, and oh, we have a gap there, right? We're missing. There's 3 days of work, we don't know what to do, right? I need a story with 5 story points to fill my gap, right? Because my sprint is 30 points, and I've got enough stories to do 25 points. I need the story with 5 points. Hey team, find me a story with 5 points. That's ridiculous. It's like playing Tetris, right? Trying to accommodate things in that container, in that box, and it kind of doesn't really make sense. This is very much an output-driven way of thinking, right? As opposed to we just have a goal. We want to achieve this capability. Then it doesn't matter whether you have a bit of slack or not, right? So this is really powerful to do, right? Having proper sprint goals that are not just a list of things you want to achieve. And just doing what the Scrum Guide says, right? That is hard enough, right? But if you do it on an outcome driven, it's really hard to do, but it's really powerful if you manage it. And if I go beyond here, I think it's a matter of how we define success, right, or victory. So if we've delivered stuff and we say, hey, we're done, right? We shipped it, it's done. We celebrate this. It's like declaring victory too soon, really, right? Because you don't know yet whether what you've delivered, what you shipped at the end of that sprint is actually valuable. You didn't spend the time to, not yet at least, right? You haven't talked to the users, maybe. You just shipped it. So there's no way you know whether it's valuable or not, right? So it's declaring victory too soon. And so what we need to do is change our definition of success, really. You know? And the typical corporate definition of success is, on spec, on time, and on budget. And that's a typical, traditional sort of project management view of the world. But it's still very much alive today, right? Even in the very agile teams, or teams that are doing agile, but they're not necessarily are being agile, right? And it's just not good enough, right? You just can't tell by being on time and on budget whether the product was a good one, right? You just can't do that. You don't have enough information to be able to say this. And again, if I steal again from Jeff Patton, another great guy, I recommend you look him up you've got lots of talks on YouTube. If you're on scope and on time and your outcome is good, then you win, right? That's clear. Now, if you're not quite good on the scope, right? You had to descope stuff at the end and that you planned originally, but you're still on time and the outcome is positive, right? People love your product. Then, well, you still win, really. Like nobody cares the fact that you had to descope a few features that you planned a year ago, right? If the outcome is good and the thing is valuable, then it's fine, right? Now, let's say, you had to descope stuff, you're not on time, so you're late, right? But the outcome is good. Well, I would say you still pretty much win, right? Because you've delivered something of value that helps the users or your customers. Now, but let's say you're on time, you're on scope, so you've delivered exactly what you said, right? Like 6 months or a year ago or something. But the outcome is negative, right? Because it's not actually delivering any value. And I've seen this again and again, where we declare the project successful, but nobody knows whether the users are using it or they are not using it because actually it's not that great, and they prefer to use the thing that they were using before, right? That's where everybody pretends to win, right? That's where everybody's pretending to win because we don't, la 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 la. I don't want to hear, right? Because we're not even checking about what the outcome is, right? So you can't even actually tell whether the outcome is even worse than that, right? Because you can't even tell sometimes. So I think what that means really is that, the message for me here is that Agile doesn't have a brain, right? And I think a lot of people take the Scrum recipe or the Kanban recipe or whatever methodology you use as a recipe, right? And I just follow the recipe, I follow the rules, and then that's it, right? But it doesn't have a brain, right? You still need to have a strategy. You still need to design your product. You still need to talk to users and understand, what's valuable, what's not. You can't just declare things to be valuable, right? And it's like an analogy with football, right? Like a game of football. It's a bit like saying, well, we played by the rules, so the game was good. It's like, no, you don't. Just because you've applied all the rules correctly doesn't mean it was a good game, right? Nobody says this about a game. That's not how it works, right? And I think we should think about this the same way, right? In our software project endeavors, right? Just because you followed the rules doesn't really mean anything. It just means you're playing the game. That's it. So here's my first controversial thing, I guess, is I'm thinking, well, when I say get rid of backlogs, because, well, why do I say this? I guess first thing first. Why do I say this? I think I'm saying this because, well, you have this backlog, this thing to do, right? This big list, and it's a bit tyrannical, right? You have to do more, the more better, right? The more backlog items you deliver, the better. That's what project managers are going to think most of the time. But the thing is, like we just said, that the work that you do is not the same as value delivered, right? It's just not the same. So when I say get rid of backlog, I don't mean you don't have a backlog of things to do. What I'm saying is don't use it as a tyranny thing, right? A tyrannical thing that you have to follow absolutely and deliver everything that's in it, right? That's not the point of it. And what I would want to do instead is use more like techniques like impact mapping, right? Which from this guy Goiko Atsik, great books on the topic and other topics. He's a great speaker. But impact mapping, yeah, is a really good technique if you don't know what it is. So it's just a simple map like this, where you have your deliverables just above my head here, right, that way. And that's basically your backlog of stuff, right? But there's a link to the impact you want to give to people, the actors, who is going to be impacted by this, and then the final business goal that you want to achieve, right? But it's not just linking things, right? Because the idea here is that all the deliverables on the right-hand side, they're all optional, right? They're not requirements. You don't need to do them all. Right? You just need to pick one, the one that you think has the higher chance of success, and then you do one. And if the impact is reached and then the goal is reached, then you stop. Right? You don't need to do more backlog stuff. You don't need to deliver all that stuff. You go away. That's a good antidote to that feature factory thing I was describing earlier, right? Because you only do what's necessary. Because the point is, you want to minimize effort, right? You don't want to maximize effort. But often when we work on this, on time, on budget, and on scope, we kind of maximizing effort, really, basically, for the budget that we've got, which is kind of stupid, really. You want to minimize effort, but you want to maximize impact, right, or value. Right? But you want to minimize effort, right? So you just want to have a bunch of options, really, and say, okay, we're going to take that one and build that and see what it does, and check the impact that it has. Did we deliver value with this thing or not? And then carry on that way, right, and build more value that way. So if we go back to this little graph I made earlier, excuse me, with a number of stories we've developed over time. Now this curve, right, that I described at the beginning, it seems to me at first like, oh, that's the ideal curve I've heard, where the product owner knows, they know what they're doing, right? They've had a thought about the product. So they have a bunch of stories in that they've put at the beginning. But is that really the ideal curve? Because, that, like I said before, that would mean everything has been designed upfront. Everything has been decided upfront, which is not very agile if you think about it, right? So perhaps a better curve would look more like that, where it keeps increasing because you start small, you build something, and then you learn from it. You get feedback, you're constantly learning, and then your scope just keeps increasing. Now, you could say, well, that's just scope creep, right? And that's terrible from a project management perspective because, well, the scope just keeps increasing. We're never going to stop. We're never going to know when we're finished, etc. There's some truth to that, but really, if you really want to be agile, you want to start small and just build up on this, right? You don't want to have this curve where you've decided everything up front. That seems to me, anti-agile, the most anti-agile thing you could do, really, from a product design point of view. But now, of course, you want to think: is there some way to have some kind of an agility measurement? How much agility do you actually have? Now, I'm not sure how pragmatic or feasible this is really, but just to throw it out there, maybe we could look at the number of stories that you discovered. And when I say discovered, I mean the stories that comes up once you started the project, right? Like you're doing a sprint review and you're talking to people, and while you're doing a demo, let's say someone said, oh, what about this? Wouldn't that be great if we did this instead of that? And you go, oh yeah, okay, let me add it to the backlog. So this kind of stories, right? The things that come up after, the things that come up from feedback, etc. All those stories that you discover once you started. And what's the ratio of that with the stories that you originally planned, right? Before you talk to anyone, before you build anything, before you got any feedback. So what's that ratio like, right? And if it's close to zero, right, because the top is zero, maybe you're not really learning all that much or getting any feedback. Or significant feedback, right? Because you're not changing anything. Your scope is the same as what it was right at the start. But perhaps it's also the opposite, right? It's like a ratio closer to 1. So you have none of the original stories planned, right? So could that be a bad thing? Maybe it could be a bad thing, right? Because you're just chaotic and you're changing all the time. But it could be a good thing, right? Because maybe your original idea was just not that good, right? And you've learned a better thing to do along the way. But that, well, I don't know. We could discuss that, but it could be a way to measure things, right? So if the green line again here is the stories when they are created and it keeps increasing, then the number of stories over time when you're developing them, you're just going to be playing catch up, right, all the time. And it might look like this, right, because you're probably going to come up with stories faster than you can develop them, which means the two lines are never going to meet, right, which is a problem, right, because from a PM point of view, you might say, well, we're never going to finish this thing, right? And I guess we go now in this territory of, project versus product thinking, right? A product is basically never finished, right? So it doesn't matter, right? Where a project has an endpoint. So that might feel like a problem if you're dealing with or if you're approaching things from a project perspective. But what that really means here is that, okay, you need something else, right? You need something else to measure progress. There's no way you can measure progress here, right? Because you're never getting closer to the scope. So you cannot tell when you finish. So you need to be value driven. That's what this means, right? You need to be able to measure not just progress by the number of things you've developed or the number of stories you've churned in that feature factory, but value, right? Have we developed value? And when I say this, people say, okay, but value, is really difficult to measure because, some of it is tangible, like KPIs and profit and stuff like that. This stuff is easy to measure. Most businesses have some kind of measurement like that, but it's quite detached from the project itself, right? It's sometimes you're developing, let's say, an internal tool for a company. How do you relate the individual features you have in that project to, let's say, revenue or something? It's impossible to do that link unless you're like a one-man band, right? So maybe you can do that, but in any organization as substantial size, you probably can't do that. Mostly things are intangibles, right? It's excitement or reputation, comfort, ease of use, those kind of things. Very hard to put a number, very hard to quantify. So how do you measure value, right? This term value is very vague anyway, right? But I think it's not as hard as we think. And I think we should just try. We should just try as an industry, right? Because I don't believe it's that hard. And an analogy I gave before is health, right? Like there's no measurement for health. There's no number to say how healthy you are, from 0 to 10 or something. That just doesn't exist, right? But it doesn't mean we don't have a medicine, right? It doesn't mean we don't have a science of making you becoming more healthy, right? There are things you can quantify, like, I don't know, cholesterol, heartbeat, etc. So there are things we know we can measure, but they are not just because you have a good heartbeat doesn't mean you're healthy, right? And the fact that we don't have a number for being healthy doesn't mean we can't strive for that. And I think the biggest problem is that we just assume value, right? That's how we often work. That there's a product owner role person. A product owner is going to declare things to be valuable, right? That's what the Scrum Guide says, right? The product backlog should be ordered by value. Okay, how do you know? Right? How do you know what's valuable? Just because someone said so? This is basically a guess, right? It's an educated guess because people are not stupid. They work in the domain, they have experience and all that. But really, you don't know, right? And most product fail, really. Like, what's the success rate of startups? Well, it's pretty low, right? And everybody thinks their idea is the best, right? That's our normal human bias, right? So you need to actually validate those ideas, right? Because most ideas are bad ideas, And if you just got a third of your ideas being good ones, I'd say you're pretty good, right? So we can't just assume that because we've declared this to be the most valuable thing, because I just know my team and I know my company, I think this is valuable. You don't know really until you put it in the hand of people, right? So because of that, what it means is, another controversial thing is, you want to get rid of requirements, right? Because that's what it means. If you're value driven, you don't have requirements because nothing is really required anyway. Like, how many projects do you end up with where you descope stuff at the end in order to become on time? And if you descope stuff at the end, that means they weren't really required, right? Literally speaking. So I don't like that word requirements at all, right? For me, they're more like a hypothesis, right? Because it's a guess, right? Or it's an hypothesis. Like, we think that if we build this feature, if we make this, if we produce this output, we will therefore have this outcome, right? But it's an assumption, right? And you might be right and you might be wrong, right? And I think we need to have a more of a scientific approach to this, right? And say, okay, we need to test this, right? We thought that with this feature, we're going to drive more business. We thought that with this feature, we're going to drive engagement. We thought that with this feature, people are going to use the product more, or it's going to make their life easier. Well, does it, right? Do we check this stuff? Not enough, right? And so if you use hypothesis-driven development, which is a thing, right? Check it out if you don't know about it, where you really you don't really use requirements or user stories. You kind of use this hypothesis like you see here on the screen, where it says, right, we believe that this capability, right, what we want to achieve, will result in this sort of outcome, impact or behavior change, or and we will know we have succeeded when we see this signal, right? Which is a great phrase, I think, there, because it means there's a way to measure it, right? And the way you measure stuff like that is, I think, the most. I mean, you have different ways of doing this, right? You could measure, usage of the software or the features. Right? Are people actually using this? But that's still a proxy, right? Because if they don't have a choice, right, then if users don't have a choice, then the fact that they use it doesn't really tell you much, right? Obviously. So it depends if your users are choosers or if your users are not choosers. If they can choose what tool they use, right? Then you have measuring usage is good, right? But you can go beyond that. You can measure behavior change, right? The before and after your product, or the before and after that feature, right? Did they work differently? And now that they have that feature, do they behave differently? Do they do their workflow in their everyday life at work is different, maybe, etc. So there are things like that you can measure, and we could discuss that. There's I have lots of examples that I could give you on how this can be done. But measuring impact and behavior change is for me nowadays the key, really, the thing I really want to capture more than anything else, really. How are we doing on time? Right, I shall move on. And I think, right, the last point I'm going to make before we can open up to discussions is this one. So big vision, small execution. So what do I mean by this? Well, when I look back at a lot of projects that I see around different companies, they often have relatively small visions, small, kind of mediocre, pathetic little visions, and it's not exciting, right? But they have enormous executions, right? Huge executions. So to give you an example, right, there would be a company that they have lots of data, and people share data with themselves, but they share it, let's say, by email, which is probably the worst way you can do that, right? So they send really large emails to each other, let's say, and that sounds like a bad thing. So let's change that. Let's have a tool that, like a data science platform, where we can share data around. Well, that's a small vision in my book, because you're not really changing how you work, right? You're still sharing the same stuff. You just have a tool to do it. So, okay, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do, right? But it's a small vision. It's not changing. It's not radical, right? It's not like we're going to put a man on the moon, which is why I've got that background here on that picture. It's not groundbreaking, really. You don't change how you work. You're still sharing the same files with the same people, the same way as before. Okay, you make it more efficient, right? Okay, that's good, but it's not groundbreaking, right? And yet, so small vision, well, relatively small, and yet it will be an enormous execution, right? Let's put a team of 10 people and then we'll work on this for the next 3 years. Oh, really? Do you know what I mean? So small visions and big executions are really quite a problem, I think, from an agility point of view, right? Because you have this big machine to achieve, well, not that much, really, from a business perspective, where really what you want is big vision, right? Like, we want to put a man on the moon. That's big, right? But small execution, lots of small iterations, right? And when I say small, I mean small compared to the vision, right? Like in the case of the NASA exploration and the moon landing, right? They didn't go with this massive project to go straight to the moon, right? They had baby steps, right? Let's put something on orbit. Okay, we can do that. Okay, let's put something alive. Right? I think the Russians first put a dog. I think, if I'm, don't quote me on that. I think they had a dog, right, in orbit, and then I think the American had a chimpanzee or something in orbit or something. Don't quote me. I think someone might know better than me on this, but let's put someone living on there, and then let's have someone for an entire day in space, see if they can survive, and then let's go to the moon, but we not land. Let's see if we can just go there and come back, right? And then have another mission where we land, etc. So it's more of an iterative way of doing this, right? Small, lots of repeated iterative execution, but big vision, and that's a big failure in what I can see most of the time. Anyway, I think I'll, if that's okay, I said a lot and I brought a lot on the table here, so I think I will stop here and open up for discussion, I think.
Thanks very much, David. I was going to say there was a couple of comments in, not a lot of questions in the chat, but a couple of comments I thought might be interesting to address first, because they sort of came up, and then see if there were any other questions.
Let me stop my screen.
There was a sort of Kirsty said, like, how can you not, in capitals, have your end users involved in a development project?
Yeah.
And David said, surprisingly common, maybe due to lots of layers in between.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, Kirsty and David, do you want to argue about that or talk about that, or it's an interesting point?
Yeah, sorry, go on, Chrissy.
Sorry, I think it's just my experience of where I work now, and I've been really lucky. The last two companies I worked for, in the first company, we literally had end users interviews to make sure that they also got what they wanted. Currently, the product I'm working on, we do not only do very extensive UX, but also we use human-centered design as part of the thing. So you have to have your end user in there to test it. So every time you have an iteration of the UX, some feature might start working, but the end user can at least start testing already. So we will get much more feedback throughout the sprint.
So I think in my experience, I see there's three cases in my head that I can think of. There's the cases where there's so many layers between you and the users that you never see them, and that's obviously terrible. I think we all can agree on that. That's not controversial, right? And it sounds insane, but it happens because you have big corporations, big machines with lots of departments and lots of people between you and the people, and it becomes really hard then, right? And then you have perhaps from what you described, your case where you're in touch with the users, you do talk to them. Not you maybe, but the development team does talk to them, and you have this interaction and this collaboration going. But I think there's another category, let's say, in between, right, where you do have users and you can talk to them and they are accessible to you and you can just get on the phone and talk to them. But you have this, it's not a collaboration, right? They are not necessarily gonna, you ask them, what do you want? And they go, well, I don't know what I want, right? It's not really an active sort of feedback, right? You'll do your sprint and then you show something and you say, what do you think? But if you say, what do you think? People will just say, yeah, I don't know. I need to use it, right, to be able to tell you. And so do they actually use it, right? Or is it just another demo? And really they're waiting for the end product to actually use it then, right? And so that's a category where I see most people in, right? So when I say they don't have users, that's kind of what I mean, right? They have users, but they are not really that engaged, right? Or you're not yourself that engaged with them in the sense of an active collaboration of really trying to discover what really would help them, because they don't necessarily know either, right? So I've been on projects where I would say, okay, like I want to observe you work. Like, can I just go and watch? and people look at me really weird, like, what do you mean? Like, you want to watch me work for a day? It's like, yeah, I just want to observe you work. I don't want you to write a document telling me what you think you need, right? I want to see it, and I want to, observe it, and maybe we can together with discovery workshops and things like that work out what you actually need, right? And so at the end of a sprint, you want people to actually use it, right? But this is really rare, right? You just get the product owner or a few stakeholders that just nod and go, yeah, that's what we said we would want, back at the beginning of the sprint. And they just reflect on that, right? That, is this what I meant when I first wrote the story on Jira? And like, yes, that's what I meant when I wrote it. Or no, it's not what I meant. Okay, but that's a bit of feedback, but it's not that significant, is it? Do you know what I mean? It's you're only checking against what you thought you'd planned earlier, but you need to actually test it, right? You need to validate it. Does it actually, if I go back to the hypothesis-driven development, what was the hypothesis, and did it actually deliver the impact that you expected, right? If you wanted a 10% increase in the tool being used, right? More people coming in that don't use it already. Well, did you reach that? And if not, why? Right? Does that make sense? What I'm saying? I'm rambling a bit now.
I wondered, Kirsty, could I just quickly ask you, how close is your customer to you? Is it like an internal customer that's on site, or is it very much an end user that's external?
It's an end user in Africa and in South America, and so they basically, our end users are the partners who are working with us to sign up plant doctors for training.
Cool, thank you for that. I'm just gonna go through the other point that was brought up when you were chatting. So Simon said, I see output celebrated as it's an immediate touchable event. An outcome may only be seen days, weeks, months later. How do you practically deal with this time lag when
Very good question. In fact, I think I had a slide on that, but I don't think I need the slide. Yeah, so very good point. So there's usually a lag completely, right? And it might be quite long, right? You do something good for the business. How do you know, or when do you know that's actually positive? That might be months and months down the line, right? At which point you can't tell what caused it, right? So it's impossible to do the link, right? And on top of that, at any one time, there'll be lots of things happening in the company, so you can't tell what's causing this sudden goodness happening. No way, right? So the two things there is that you have lagging indicators, but you have leading indicators too, right? So for example, if you're let's say you want something non-software related, you have a construction site and you want to increase safety. Well, a lagging indicator or measurement is, well, the number of accidents has decreased, right? But once you have that, it's a bit late, right? Because if they go up, right, it's not good. It's after the fact, right? But you could have leading indicators, like, are people using safety equipment, right? That's a leading indicator. It's a proxy, let's say, right? That's another word for it. So you need to have those two indicators, right? And then with the leading indicators, you can then prioritize, right? And say, well, that leading indicator is telling me that we should do X, so let's do more of that, right? And then you have that lag. There's nothing you can do about that lag. The lag is there. It's part of how the business works. And some business are lucky because it's fast. If you're making an Android app and you can see people buying it just like that, then you have a direct link to this, right? But if it's a more complicated business model, you might not just see it.
I was going to feed something, if I may speak to my experience, which I think is a bit naughty of me because I'm supposed to be chairing this. So
no, go ahead.
One of the things is when we set our OKRs for the quarter, or with whatever we're doing, then that's where we set the outcomes, and there's long-term metrics set in that. So I'm working on a project at the moment, which is like, we've got and this is hypothesis-driven development, basically. We're saying we've got this thought about how we can get more customers. And in our case, it's papers published. So So we've got this theory and it's a hypothesis and we're going to build something to prove it. But all of our OKRs are nothing about delivery. They're all about the outcome, the metrics of, you know, increasing the number of papers submitted, or increasing, if someone gets a paper rejected, but they're offered something else, increasing the number of successful submissions following that and stuff. So, and I think that's the way of doing
awesome.
is setting those kind of objectives. So you have an objective and you've got an activity that's going to get you to the objective. And that's the way we've been doing it. That seems to work really well, actually, because it isn't about build this tool. If we set that as the objective, then that doesn't mean anything. But if we set increasing number of customers and how are we going to do it, we're going to build this tool, then we've got something we can measure, and we can measure that success.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly a very good example. Yeah.
So what I was going to ask everyone to do is, if you want to ask a question or something, Jürgen has put something in the chat, so I'm going to get you to actually ask your question directly, Jürgen, so I'm not just reading out everyone's points. Use the raise your hand thing in the side bit, in the participants thing. Don't use the thumbs up. So Ian's done that. So we're going to have Jürgen and then Ian. Apparently, don't use the thumbs up because I can't see the windows that are not on my main screen, so I can't see the thumbs up. Okay, so Jürgen and then Ian.
Well, mine was basically a follow-up and has been partially answered while I was typing it. I didn't realize it. It was about the user input, because it's cool that you follow up with users and check that they basically how they use the program. But of course, every user is very different. So you might end up with a problem that, depending on the cognitive functions, they don't use the product optimally. So you would need to have follow-up training. Do you do this as well? Is that included in the package? Like, is that part of the development? Which I would think so.
Yeah, absolutely. So a good book I would recommend is what's it called? I think it's Making Users Awesome. I think it's from someone called Kathy Sierra. Really, really good book. And in this, it looks at, you know, the fact that really you have two learning curves, right? I mean, often we develop products, whether it's software or not, and then there's a manual or an instruction thing that comes with it, right? On how to use the thing. Like if you bought a camera, then there's a thing to tell you how to use a camera. But there's nothing that comes with a camera on telling you how to become a photographer, right? But that's what people actually need, right? and I think it's the same here, right? We're giving people a product or tool to help them doing something, but okay, if the tool is intuitive, they can learn how to use it. Maybe they need a user manual or something, but really we need to teach them how to use it to make their work better, right? That's what they really want to do, right? If they don't see how it makes, if they don't see the benefit to them, they're not going to do it, right? So that part, it has to be, if it's not self-evident, it has to be taught in some way, right? I don't know if does that answer your question, Jürgen?
Yeah, definitely. Sure. Because I was wondering if you don't get caught up, into trying to fulfill all the, wishes, and in order to get a good, review or like, feedback.
Yeah.
You basically need to satisfy everyone, and then you end up, not being able to serve everybody. So I like the user education a lot. Thanks.
Because a good example just to finish on this point is a project I worked on some time ago, where it was for the finance department, right? And they're used to just have the single numbers, right? Like how much is this? What's the cost of this? What's the revenue of this projection and stuff like that? And then we added a whole bunch of statistical analysis to it and data science. And so now they ended up with like Monte Carlo simulations, if people know what that is, so you end up with not a number but a distribution, right? So you can make a judgment call on the error bars around things and how statistically relevant something is, etc. But they didn't really know how to use this because they've never done it before, right? And so the point was not to teach them how to use the software. Oh, to get the graph, you click there and then you press this. It's like, no, how do I make my business prediction now that I've got a graph rather than a number, right? And how do I make that report to my boss, right? It's got nothing to do with your software. But if you don't do that, then they have too much of a barrier to adopting your product, right? It's just, well, I'm just going to keep using the Excel spreadsheet I had before, and that's it. So if you don't do this adoption thing, then it's not gonna work really well. Anyway, I'll stop there.
Cool. Next up is Ian, and then B. Egan.
Hi, David.
Hey, Ian.
Thought-provoking talk as usual. Thank you. So my question is, if the premise of the talk is that that agility is scarce, which I tend to agree, that's my own observation. Working in a number of companies, it's pretty scarce. What do you see as the major impediment to having agility within development organizations? What's stopping it?
How many hours have you got?
Yeah, I know. Prioritize, David.
Yes. I think it's mostly psychological, actually. I think it's the fact that we crave certainty as human beings, right? And if I tell people where we don't really know what's the best thing to do, right? We have an idea, we're going to try and get there, but we need to keep exploring the space in order to discover the best thing. That's difficult, right? Because that means we could end up in a pit, right? We could end up doing something wrong, and people don't like that, right? It's uncertain, and I think that's hard. So I think people tend to then do agile because they like the idea of it, right? It sounds good, and the practices are sort of easy enough to adopt, really. But the true agility, well, I don't want to do a true Scotsman's fallacy here, but the real agility comes if you really embrace that uncertainty, right, and use it to your advantage rather than trying to fight it. And I think people they'd rather be wrong than admitting that we don't know, right? In a nutshell. And I don't know how to fight this, right? I think in my experience, there's people who are more, how would you say, more used to, let's say, living in the vague, they're more okay with that than other people. And I think the people who live in that vagueness or can cope with it better than others, let's say, would embrace those ideas a lot easier than people who are perhaps a bit more anxious about, I'm not in control, I don't know, we need to have a plan, we need to know exactly what we're doing at every step. And you can still adopt the mechanics of agile, but still with this, I don't like uncertainty. I need to know exactly what we're going to deliver, when we're going to deliver, and yeah, I don't have a magic bullet, really.
No, there isn't one. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. So, B. Egan. B, what's your first name? Is it B or is it?
No, it's Brianna. And for some
Brianna.
reason, Zoom would not let me change my name today, so it just.
Okay, Brianna.
So, David, thank you for your presentation. My question to you, I have many, but I'll focus on one to start with, and let everybody else have an opportunity. What did you find that was sort of like partially controversial about your presentation? What ideas were you not completely sure about? Because I didn't actually hear anything that was controversial or
yes,
out there thinking. I mean, we may not be applying these in our current roles in organizations, but I didn't hear anything that screamed.
Okay. Well, I refrained myself a bit, to be honest, but I think it depends who you talk to. I've presented these sort of ideas before to some, depending on the audience, or some people are like, "What are you talking about?" But I see I've got a friendly audience here. But I mean, the idea of getting rid of backlogs, for example, could be quite controversial, right? Like the idea that the requirements are, nothing is really required. It's like, what are you talking about? That's controversial. But although I'm sold on this one more or less 100%, the one that perhaps not too sure about is perhaps the backlog one, in fact, because as much as I like the impact mapping idea, and then everything is an option and so on, because of what I just said, in fact, about the psychology of people, I think some people would just not cope with it, right? And they need a to-do list, right? And I can see this now at home you know, with my wife and kids, right? Like when we started the whole lockdown thing, my wife was like, right, we need a plan. We need to write down what we're going to do, which exercise we're going to do, when we have lunch, what we eat, when we have a break, you know, a whole schedule for the day. And I was like, nah, we don't, we just do what we do. And, you know, and I was fine not having a plan, but I can see the appeal of a plan, right? So you have a list of things. I mean, I might write down what I want to do and what I don't want to do. But she felt so anxious, you know, about not having a plan, that I gave in. I'm like, okay, let's have a plan for you, right? but I mean, it sounds like I'm giving up what I really think, but it's the psychology of people, you can't really change who they are, right? And I think you have to, in some way, we have to accept the fact that some people are really anxious, right, about uncertainty, and we have to help them too, right? And so having a backlog in that case is probably still a good idea, right? Having a list of things so that people can refer to. We just don't want to fall in the pit of the backlog becoming a tyrannical tool that, you know, we must develop everything that's in it, right? It's okay if some things don't get done because maybe they were just a bad idea, right? Just because they were written on it doesn't mean we have to. So the plan needs to change, right? I don't know. Does that answer your question, sort of?
You answered the question exactly as I thought you would. In terms of the backlog, yeah, like depending on how mature or people you are working with, whatever your product is, then yeah, a backlog may be great, but then there's times where like trash it. It's not going to solve any of our problems.
No.
I'm living that anxiety with two different teams right now. So one dedicated to having, you know, a militant defense of the backlog, and another's like, you know what, it's not solving our problems. We have to be way more open to taking in feedback and just changing our ideas, and it may be more on the fly than we're all comfortable with. So I suspected that's where you were going to go. Thank you for answering my question.
That's good. Thank you. I've got more controversial stuff if people want to, but
I've got another comment to make, but before I make it, but based on what you were talking about, I just want to know, does anyone else have a comment or something they want to say with regards to this current topic? Alistair, is it about the current topic?
Yeah, just an insight on that around the you know, the psychology and the sense that people have uncertainty and anxiety and so on. I think that's where you know, as we develop our leadership skills, I think is what helps. You know, if leaders move to the space where they are enabling and you know, emotionally intelligent servant leaders, then they're working to create a safe environment and allow the team members to feel safe, then you can have a lot more flexibility and ambiguity and so on. But if you have a leader who themselves don't handle that, and I worked with a project manager on a project which was just fascinating, just could not handle changes to the product backlog and to what we were doing. You know, and we had two major epics that we did not want to deliver in the end. They started the project with they were musts, and then halfway through we realized that it was going to cost us 3 months worth of effort, whole team effort, to save 3 days a year of manual labor. Just not worth the input. But as I say, sometimes people can't let go of the fact that, no, you said it was a must. It's got to stay in the backlog. It's, you know, otherwise we're not delivering what we said we were going to deliver. So we need to be able to help lead people, I think, in that way, and work with their psychology. So just a thought there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, very good. Yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that, Alistair.
So Olu was next. I think you put your thumb up, and then we have Aaron.
Hi, David. Thanks. That was a good presentation. That was a nice presentation, quite sort of informative. Just my question is on sort of trying to figure out, when you were looking from an agile standpoint, when you're kicking off of a team that there's no backlog in place, you're just kicking off a team. How do you get to understand? Because I've seen scenarios whereby people come in, they look excited, they want to work on the project, but they have different characters. Some people would not talk when there's a room of 5 people. Some people will talk where you have 1 or 2 people. How do you balance that side whereby you're talking to them individually and then you're talking to them to bring them in the team? And then you start to switch around the different roles whereby you say to them, next week, I want to see what you're talking about. Feel comfortable. Let everybody feel comfortable. You don't want a scenario whereby someone passes a comment or makes a suggestion and everybody's thinking, oh, that doesn't make any sense. So even if it doesn't make sense, you put a thumbs up towards that person saying to him, oh, that's a good contribution. Even if then later you could speak to that person behind the back. After a while, you start to build a team together that works in synergy rather than people come up to an agile product, you come up to a stand-up meeting and thinking, okay, he's going to be the only one talking, that might as well just sit down and watch him talk. How do you balance participation from people who are pretty much laid back, but they have a lot of stuff, but they're not pouring that out?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think that's where having a coach, an agile, I mean, I know it's a bit of a buzzword these days, having a coach, but that's where it can really help because what you're, and correct me if I misunderstood you, right? But you're not talking about launching a project, but a team, right? So people who've never worked together necessarily, right? Then they come together, right?
Yes.
Okay. And they might not know each other, or they have different personality type and so on, or they might just disagree and clash on things, right? And I'm going to sound cliche, but you need, I like to do team building exercises, but when I say team building, often what resonates in people's head is, oh, we're going to have a meal and we're going to play mini golf or something, and it's it's a nice social event, right? But it doesn't really mean much, right? It doesn't really do anything. I mean, you had a nice time and you might bond on a human level, okay, but it doesn't build a team, right? It's just a bunch of people who had fun one night, so it's just not good enough, right? And so what I try to do is, well, there's several activities you can do, right? You can, if you really have different personality types and different psychologies in the team, you really want to create a safe space, right? Where people are, if you have introverts and extroverts, let's say, that's that might be difficult to interact with, right? So the extroverts have to realize that you have introverts in the team, and you can't just and I've got to deal with that, right? I tend to say, okay, let's work on this right now on the whiteboard. And then the introvert says like, oh no, I need to, hang on, just let me think on my own and I'll get back to you, right? And as an extrovert, I need to learn to respect that, right? And similarly, the introvert needs to do the same work the other way around, right? But there's lots of team building activities that can be really useful, like having a charter, right? Or how would you call it, a team alliance, or a panel of values, or something that, as a team, what do we value, what do we adhere to, is it respect, is it learning, is it there's a whole bunch of
collaboration.
Yeah, or collaboration. There could be a whole bunch of technical excellence, etc. There's a whole bunch of things you could say, yeah, this is really what we are about as a team, as a group of people. But let's agree on those, right? Because, and then put them on the wall, and then you can say, well, the practices we do, right, as a team, the things we do, right, whether it's code reviews or retrospective or whatever it may be, does it reflect the values we agreed we have, or does it not, right?
All right, thanks for that, David. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Aaron?
Yes, great. Fantastic talk. I'm wondering, have you applied any techniques? I've been using, without officially using, some of the big 5 personality trait questions as I kind of call it a slow qualifier of team construction. So one of the things I've been doing is saying that the first 30 days of when we start up a team is kind of like the probationary period for everybody. So you have so many votes that you can kind of, vote in and out of yourself, right? Now you can't vote other people off the island. That doesn't make any sense. That would actually be an interesting idea, because that would actually be a qualifier or a disqualifier, I should say. But I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on applying kind of psychometrics, because it's something I've really been doing or I'd say, accelerating the last 3-4 years in doing in team construction, because I think there's just this gross mismatch, right? We're trying to form fit methodology models around people, and in our field, we're just saying, hey, but pretend we're making cars, right? And we're going to the Toyota production system, and we all agree, and we all have to bring all our families, and everyone has to work a shift. I mean, we would instantly start sorting each other based on natural strengths and weaknesses on the work we would do. So that makes sense there. But for some reason, when we do what we do here, we still just keep throwing the blob at it and wondering why half the time the people don't fit. So I'm just wondering if that's something you're investigating or applying.
Yeah. And in fact, well, I'm a bit of a amateur psychologist. I mean, well, when I say this, it's just because I read a few books, right? But I mean, so in fact, I gave a talk on that. In fact, at Agile, well, the one-day conference we had. When was this? Last year? Was it last year, Mike? Which was which was a remake of a conference talk I gave at Agile on the Beach. You know, this is a conference in the UK. Anyway, and I talked about the psychology of Agile, right? And so big fan of the Big Five model, right? Because they have several psychology models out there, right? There's a Myers-Briggs, there's others, right? But the Big Five seems to be the one that's scientifically actually backed up by science, as opposed to something made up. And in fact, I presented my profile out there. I said, hey, that's what my profile is. So I was quite open about this, and I've done since then. I've done it with teams just to initiate that, how would you say, that safe space idea, right? Like I said, look, this is my profile. I'm really extroverted, and I'm really not that conscientious. Sorry, things like that, right? And I'm not agreeable either. But the openness of this, right, was people like, oh, okay, you share this profile, okay. Now, I was thinking at some point, should we make this compulsory? Like everybody makes the test and everybody share the profile. But that might just defeat the purpose, right? That if people are not quite open to this yet, I feel like it should come from them, right, as opposed to being imposed, right? But just do it if you're the leader of the team and you do it yourself, then I guess it shows that okay, it's safe to do that. So it's okay to be open, and it's okay to be human, and have a different personality type and so on. I don't know if that does it. There was another part to your question, but I forgot what it was.
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering it in terms of applying it in team construction, because it's something
right.
It has an impact, obviously, because people know I do it, so they respond accordingly. Meaning they sometimes don't want to be involved, or they have kind of let's say other negative responses. But to be honest, I found it's literally the biggest predictor of success. If I get these teams constructed without saying Big Five, just using this little openness, agreeableness, that's it. Those are the two I even ask, actually. And I just cherry pick the questions. It's all open source now. And you go.
Yeah, no, so the problem is that in the corporate environment, you're going to have so many constraints about how the company works and how they form teams, right? And it's going to be mostly based on skills and nothing else, right? Well, React and C#, so boom, together, done, go and work and do that thing. With no, I guess that's what you're saying, right? With no regards to whether they're going to get on or have the same, what would you say, ideology or view of things, right? And I keep going back to introvert and extrovert because that's an obvious example that people can relate to, right? But another good one, and I'll stop talking because I'm talking too much, but there's you could see people as doers and versus dreamers, right? And then the doers, for example, they just like to do stuff, right? And then you have the dreamers who like to have options. And I'm a bit of a dreamer. I like to have options. I don't want to be constrained, right? But so imagine a situation where you have a doer comes to a dreamer and say, "Hey, man, I'm stuck there. I've got option A and option B, and I don't know which one to choose, right?" And then the dreamer, instinctively, I would do that instinctively if I don't watch myself. I would say, "Hey, well, cool, but have you thought about option C, D, and E, and F, right?" And for the doer, that's a nightmare. It's like, oh, thanks. I had 2 options. Now I've got 6, right? Awesome. you made it worse, right? So and the same the other way around, right? If I'm a dreamer and then the doer says, oh, just make a decision. It's like, no, I can't make a decision because I haven't explored the whole space. Don't force me to make a decision. I need to have more options. So it can be a nightmare, right? To navigate two people like that working together. It's just
Or
right?
Or married.
So it's extremely important, and I wish there was much more self-organization that way, right? But in practice, how do you do that? I'm not sure, right? If you have constraints of, well, he's busy and he's doing this other project, and what do you just refuse projects? That might not be realistic, right? But and you have who you have and so on, right? And you have to deal with it. So I think part of it is you have to, and I'll stop there. You have to accept other people's personality type and learn. That's part of your learning and your growth as an individual, right? That to learn how to deal with people that don't think like you. So as much as you want a safe space, like as an introvert, I'm best working on a lockdown because I don't see anyone and I'm at home and it's great. But you need to go out of your comfort zone, right? And say, okay, maybe I need to force myself to be a bit more out there. And as an extrovert, I'm like, okay, I need to give people space. I need to, if they say they don't want a meeting about everything and they need to think on their own, I need to give them that space too. Right?
I did see Kirsty raised your hand, and are you still wanted to ask a question? Because you put it down again.
Yes, basically, I'm not sure what you mean with the big five. I think I've done things like DISC in companies, and I still have that profile somewhere.
So yeah, DISC is DISC has just 2 dimensions basically, right?
Right.
So you have a quadrant, right?
Yep.
The big five has 5 dimensions.
Right. I need to look that up then.
Yeah, and it's so DISC, and I mean there's some usefulness to DISC and Myers-Briggs, but they're very what's the word I'm looking for? They reduce they reduce human beings to just a couple of dimensions, which is obviously not quite realistic.
Basically, Myers-Briggs is not scientifically proved.
Not, yeah, I'm afraid not.
It's very controversial.
Yeah,
so I'm not really putting much hope on that one.
it's kind of made up. So the problem is all these models, people came up with the dimensions and then try to fit people in those dimensions. Whereas the big five model, it comes from as far as I understand it, it comes from a much more empirical set of data, right? They discovered those 5 dimensions and then tried to give name to them. So it feels a lot more scientific and
And the other thing is, I have a bit of a thing about introvert and extrovert. It's not that black and white. It's not that simple.
No, absolutely, yes.
Because I'm an absolute extrovert, but I prefer working from home. Just for the quiet, just let me do stuff.
No, absolutely, and
it's
I use that example a lot because that's something people know about, right? And it's a very from young. Right?
It depends on the persons. I've seen too many extroverts or people calling themselves extroverts and hiding behind it.
Yes.
And that's probably what I have against it.
Well, most people, it's a spectrum, and most people are somewhere on it, and it changes during your lifetime and during the day, right? So it's you don't want to put people in boxes like this, right? It's just extreme behaviors, right? And you can it's too extreme. But if you look at the big five, it doesn't really talk about extroversion, and so it's not even a dimension. So but look at the big five; it's pretty good. And there's lots of free test tools online. I mean, there's some you have to pay for, I think, but there's a couple of free ones, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I just dropped it into the.
Oh, cool. In the chat.
So, and then I also put there's a good it's all the questions there too, so you can cherry pick the questions out, which is what I do. And then you bunch others. So.
Cool, thanks. So I've got Andy next, and then B again. I've forgotten your first name. I'm sorry.
Brianna. Okay.
Yeah. Andy, go.
A couple of thoughts. I just wanted to kind of throw them at you, David. A great presentation. Thank you. Very thought-provoking. I wonder if you recognise any of these things that I've been seeing and I think might be contributing to us not being agile, just doing agile. One of the things I'm kind of seeing is I'm seeing a rise of people who either don't really understand what agile is or have forgotten. I think we've been doing it for quite a long time. It's, you know, kind of probably started in sort of 95-ish, you know, the Agile Manifesto in 2001. And there's actually so much agile around. I wonder if it's almost a victim of its own success. There's a lot of people kind of looking at everyone doing agile and starting to believe that's all agile is. You know, we do our iterations, we do our scrum and our sprints, but forgetting that we actually have to release the product and we have to check to see what the customer thinks and change our minds about what we're building next. Do you recognize that? Is that something other people are seeing as well?
Completely. I mean, that's kind of what I meant when with the slide where I showed, you know, agile doesn't have a brain, right? It's just, you still have to think, you still have to do the work. Just because you follow the rules doesn't mean anything, right? And then, and yeah, I mean, it's definitely a victim of its own success. And well, it's easy to adopt the practices, right? And that's therefore what people are going to do. They're going to, and when you look at, you know, forums online or you know, like Facebook groups and stuff like that, and you look at the question that people ask, right? They're going to ask, what tool should I use? Is Jira good enough? Or at the end of a sprint, there's this story is not complete. Should it go back? Or all these questions are kind of irrelevant. I just don't care, you know. But that doesn't. It's not agility at all. It's just okay. Whatever you do, mate. I really don't care. But it's somehow people are obsessed with this, you know, tools and processes. And yet, if you look at, that's one of the principles of the Agile Manifesto, right? That we shouldn't focus too much on that. But I think it's a natural instinct, right? So if you know Shu Hari, right, from the whole. I think it comes from martial arts, right, in Japan. And so you have this 3 stage, right? Shu, Hari, as you learn something. So Shu is when you're a beginner at something, and then Ha, you break the rules. And then re-level, you're that good at it that you don't really follow rules, right? So a good example is if you're a chef, right? You're cooking. When you learn to cook, right? You're Shu, right? You need the recipe, and you need to follow that recipe. And then when you're He level, well, you start breaking the rules, right? The recipe says 3 eggs, you've got 2. But they're big, so it's okay, right? And then re-level, well, you just throw ingredients, right? You're a master chef, right? You know what you're doing. You're just cooking. And if someone asks you, what have you been cooking? What's the recipe? And you go, I don't know. I don't have one. Right? I've just made it. And I think people, because they come, if you're new to this, right, whether it's agile or anything else, you're gonna start at the Shu level. There's just no way around that, right? So you're gonna ask, what's the recipe, right? Give me the recipe. That's what I want, right? And so if you're a re-level, you can't really teach a Shu person. It doesn't work that well, right? Because the Shu person wants a recipe, and then the re person says there is no recipe. It depends, and you know, it's as much as true as it might be, it's not helpful if you're a Shu level person, because you need the recipe to follow. So it's difficult, right? Because and I've seen this, and I've said this before many times, but when I've got people coming in new at Tesla, new to Agile and so on, and they say, what sprint length should I use? And I often say, well, just 2 weeks, right? Just go for 2 weeks. But that's because I'm talking to a Shu person, right? And they need a rule. But I know I've had colleagues who say, well, why did you say 2 weeks? You know, it depends. You know, sometimes it's not the right answer. You know, sometimes it might be 3 or maybe 1 week. Maybe Kanban is better. Maybe they shouldn't even do Scrum and so on. But I say, yeah, but they're not there yet, right? They need rules first, and they need to realize what for them, you know, they need to do that journey themselves. You can't just say, hey, do the right thing, do Kanban, even if that's the right thing. I feel like they have to go through that learning journey, right? And you have to have default and rules for when you're in the shoe level. And it's that barrier that people have to pass, right? And often people get stuck there, I think.
Okay. If Mike doesn't stop me just throwing in another one quickly. Something you just touched on, David, actually, that I also kind of agree may be a reason why we're not being agile, is that it's really hard work. If I'm dealing with, say, a project manager who perhaps has come from kind of a waterfally background and had kind of waterfally training, and I kind of say to him, I want you to stop planning your projects in 1 year increments. I want you to keep replanning your projects every 2 weeks or even every month. To him, this is a huge change in his workload, and it's going to be a total natural reaction to just say, no, this is just rubbish. What are you talking about? This is not the way we do projects. Is that something you also see, and how do we tackle that challenge?
Yeah, and I see that a lot. And another twist on what you said, so it's slightly different, but I think it's related, is, so when I talked about outcome versus outputs, if you talk to really senior managers or the people at the top of the companies, they tend to think in outcomes, actually, because they're close to that, right? They're close to the business. They see the numbers and the revenue going up or down or whatever, and often they would sponsor a project, right? And for them it was just a punt, right? Oh, well, we'll see if it works, right? But they're thinking in terms of outcome. But then it's given to the, let's say, the middle management layer, and their incentive is on outputs, right? And they have reports to write, and they have deadlines to hit, and if they don't, they get they get a slap on the wrist. So the problem is this finite game, right, of outputs that needs to be met, because that's how they work. And then with Agile, we're telling them, forget your deadlines and your everything you're measured against. And well, that's the barrier. That's just too hard to do, right? So all that bureaucracy, they can't just throw it away. I mean, they probably wish they could, but in practice, they can't, because that's how the whole system is based on. Even though the people at the top don't actually care that much about it. They just want results.
Cool. Sorry about this. B. Egan, would you like to talk again?
Yeah, are we okay on time? Just want to do a time check to make sure nobody has to disappear.
Well, we're fine. It's up to David, really, whether you're running out of steam, really.
I'm good to go for a bit if people are.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, we stop at 9 or when everybody collapses, whichever.
All right.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
I'm going to introduce controversy again. So again, my name is Brianna, and this one is about public policy. And I've got a little bit of encouragement from Alistair on this question. So I actually deal in public policy, and I'm currently in Texas, Houston, Texas, to be exact. And this is a COVID sort of question. How do we handle when the end users are highly against the public policy that is keeping them safe and alive? And I'm living that moment right now.
Wow.
When the governor and the county judges, who are the highest ranking authorities in the state of Texas, have issued policies to keep everyone safe. And we are seeing that momentum of just coming out and fighting the policy at any cost. How do you address that? I know we don't talk much about public policy in Agile. We kind of keep a business focus, but that public policy is now driving how business will be successful moving forward, or people being able to get back to work. And I work for an organization where we see a lot of contention. Like, people are adamantly refusing to wear masks, even though it's the safest way of handling a situation and in face-to-face interactions, and minus keeping that threshold of 3 to 6 feet. Anyway, I've gotten away a little bit from the question, but it's really looking at your end users when they're militantly against the best solution.
Yeah, so
Let's
like
not get into masks debate, eh? I don't want masks debate.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it can go heavy into debate, but I think we could also keep it just to a sliver of how do we handle end users who are just militantly against the solution.
So against what though exactly? Against that? So do you mean like in a company like you're trying to introduce Agile, let's say, and then you have a whole bunch of people who are against it, or do you mean
No,
more from a product development?
product.
Right.
I was thinking more of a product. You delivered absolutely everything they wanted. You did it. You met with them. You were constantly involved with them, and they hate it. And then they fight you on it. And it's like, I will do anything you want, but I need your help. And I'm giving is the public policy of one.
Yeah. So I'm not sure it's going to help, but I'm gonna go at it anyway. So do you know about the is it called the innovation adoption curve?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a Gaussian like this, right? Curve. And so the idea there for everyone is that any sort of new idea or product or innovation or anything really new, novel, is going to go through that sort of adoption curve, right? Where at the beginning you have a very like the early adopters, right? They jump on it, and then you have the early majority, and then the late majority, and then the laggards, right? So the laggards are the people who adopt this thing because they don't have a choice anymore, because everybody else has, right? So if you think mobile phone, for example, there's people like that, right? Who just with smartphones, right? They just refuse. Like, no, I just won't have that, you know. And then they were the very last people and they only got a smartphone because you can't buy non-smartphone anymore, right? That's the only reason they got one. But then on the other spectrum, you have like I said, the early adopters who just jumped on it, right? Like straight from the beginning, even though they were still prototypey, it probably crash. It was extremely expensive, and yet they went for it, right? And so I think when we ask for feedback, right, we just tend to ask for everyone, and we think, well, let's just ask as much people as we can. But the problem is you're going to get a whole bunch of laggards potentially, and a whole bunch of late majority people who perhaps are, from a psychological point of view, perhaps more conservative, right? Because they don't necessarily like new stuff, right? Because new stuff disrupts the status quo. And you know, my phone's good enough. I don't need anything new. And so they're going to be negative almost by definition, right? Because it's too much of a cost in their head to change. You know, so why should I change, right? It's working fine like it is. And you're going to give me a new thing that's a prototype. It probably doesn't work. And and you know what? They're actually true, right? It's actually correct. It might well be crashing, and because it's new technology, so it might well fail, right? They've got a point, right? They're not just being reluctant, and they're not being idiots for the sake of being idiots, right? They have a point, because it's risky to take on new stuff, right? So in terms of feedback on your product, you actually want to focus it to early adopters, right? And not get the laggards, because the laggards are going to be negative, right? So I mentioned just briefly this YouTube channel, right, that I started. And the first video is kind of crap, right, quality wise. I mean, I admit it, right, in front of everyone here. Like the content is probably, I'm quite okay with the content, but the quality, the picture is grainy, you know, there's not enough lighting, and it's just not very good, right? But I'm thinking, okay, the content's good, right? And then first comment, guess what the comment says? It's too dark. I'm like, oh, really? That's what you have to say? Like, what about the content? You know? And I think it's the same with product development, right? You've developed something new, it's novel, it's got this new idea, and you think it's going to really help. And then what do people say? I don't like the background, or the color is not good, or oh, it's too slow. It crashed on my old PC, or oh, you only did the iPhone and not Android. Those kind of comments, and you're like, oh my gosh, right? Don't you see the point? It's novel, it's new. Of course, I haven't done everything, and of course, it's not perfect yet. And so do you know what I mean, right? So they're not the right people to ask for feedback, not at this stage anyway. And so you really want to focus on the early adopters, and the way you do that it's a bit counterintuitive, but the way you do that is you make it slightly harder to get feedback. And it sounds weird what I'm saying, right? Because we always think we want to make it easy for feedback, so you get more of it, right? But if you make it easy for feedback, you get all the negative ones, right? The feedback that's not helpful. You wanted to make it actually a little bit harder, so it's the people who care, right? They care enough they care enough to do that effort, right, to give you the feedback. And if they care enough, then that means they are early adopters. And if they are early adopters, they're going to give you meaningful feedback, right? Feedback that actually help. Anyway, I'll throw it there. Does that make sense?
No, actually, it was a very good answer. I'm very impressed that you were willing to give an attempt. Most people I ask how they are terrified, because it is a very scary space, right? You know, because you're talking about government and politics, and no one ever wants to address that. It's uncomfortable. It doesn't matter how, if you agree or not. It's uncomfortable. So thank you for taking the opportunity. You gave a very valid effort, and you actually taught me a better way of addressing, you know, how do we handle these, just a policy on masks. We're not even talking about how to handle the rest of COVID. It's just how to handle a mask or how to handle a mask conversation. And you gave a very valid answer. Thank you.
All right.
I've got a question. No one else put their hands up. So a question, a kind of point actually, and it's going back quite a while to the no backlog thing that I wanted to bring up. It's really, maybe it's more of an anecdote. So I worked with someone a couple of years ago who always had the mantra, stories are placeholders for conversations, which I really like. I really like that as a way of approaching things. And that also sort of played in with my ideas of Agile. And so I've got quite a just-in-time approach to software delivery and story writing and stuff. So that we get the story ready just when we need it. And that often means that we come into what we call refinement sessions where the story's not fully defined. And what that means is the debate happens, and of course, if we find that we can't do anything about it, then we can kick it back and do a little bit more and then bring it again to refine or to look at as a team. Now, I really like that. A lot of people find it really difficult. And I think it's two ways. It's a little bit, I think it's a little bit edgy and on the edge and sort of hyper for some people, because there's less predictability. Yes. And then secondly, but more so, I think, because a lot of people that I work with, and this especially if they come from a testing or a BA background or a more traditional project manager, they've been kind of groomed in the mantra that you end up having these grooming sessions and you groom it and it's all totally ready and your backlog's all nice and it's a work of art before you even start taking stories in. And I find the resistance comes from those people the most, actually. But I also find a lot of people in the teams don't like it. I've sort of slowly managed to bring people round to it by a slight compromise on my part, which still keeps us not wasting a lot of time on. I mean, I hate doing a backlog. It's really a definition of waste.
It's fiddly, right? Yes, absolutely.
It is. I mean, if you look at lean software development, it's the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, and there's usually one guy in the team, right, who's like the backlog monkey, right, and it's who has to take care of this monstrosity, and it's a huge waste, right? I mean, that's not delivering value. That's just text in a tool, and right. But
don't you just let those people go? Because I've been working with a BA, and he wanted everything perfect. But like, you know what? I'm going to just put a couple of stories in my sprint, and then you perfectify whatever you want to perfectify, but at least I got my sprint going.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Yeah.
So one thing that might help is so often I make the distinction between there's two types of work, right? There's building, so I can call it building to learn, and then building to earn. So what I mean is there's always going to be a bunch of uncertainty and risk, right, and things you don't know, right? So the people who are reluctant with the lack of details and certainty in the stories, they kind of have a point, in the sense that what if you discover something about this that's really wrong? What if what if? what if there's a big monster behind that story that you didn't know?
Don't we just do something about it when we discover it, though?
Sorry, say again?
Don't we just do something? If we don't tie ourselves to having to estimate things all the time, then we don't need to worry about that. Because
no, I know I'm on your camp. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, but I think from a psychological point of view, they kind of have a point in the sense that, well, there could be something really risky in there that we could have talked about earlier. Okay, maybe, right? But if you distinguish between building to learn versus building to earn, so when I say building to earn, I mean when you reap the fruit of your labor, right? So you know everything about that thing now, that feature. You've de-risked it completely because you've learned about all the risk, technical and also you're pretty sure that's what people want. Now just go and build it properly, right? And do the documentation and make it scalable and all the good engineering practices to make it good, robust software, because you know what you need to do now. You're getting the benefit from that. But there is another type of work where you say, well, it's so risky that we need to do some work here to de-risk it, right? To learn about it. And that's a completely different type of work, isn't it? And I think it's useful to distinguish between the two, because if you say we're building to learn here, then the other people can shut up, right? Because they say, okay, we're not actually going to build it fully now, scalable and production ready. We're just going to de-risk it for now, and that's good with me. Right? Does that speak to you at all, Mike? Here.
For me, it does. The trouble is proof of concepts and spikes or whatever you want to. I think they are good, but they're really important to kind of time box them and contain them.
Oh yeah.
Because all the time you tend to be, to a certain extent you're experimenting when you could actually be doing the thing. So there's a sort of
there's a balance for sure, right?
There's a balance there.
There's at some point you need to stop experimenting, right? Which is why you need. It's like with the hypothesis-driven development I mentioned, right? You could just keep experimenting. You could keep having hypothesis, but at some point you need to say, well, that's the signal. So let's build it now, right? let's do it properly. And it's difficult because people have preferences on where they like to, spaces they prefer to live. I love to experiment, so I could easily spend my whole time experimenting and not really finishing anything. So I need a bit of a whip somewhere from the system or someone or something to make me focus and deliver, right? But there are people who are just, I don't want to experiment. They don't feel comfortable there. And if you want to bring them on board, making that distinction, I think it might help.
I think doing experiments is a good thing, but it's got to be, or the spikes, but it's got to be, the time boxing thing, and also restricting the scope of what people do, because I've seen them end up being literally massive analysis things where people are writing reams and reams of documentation that no one reads, and it starts to become a bit like a waterfully type spec opportunity. And so you've got to really balance these things and keep them short and sweet. Alistair said, one thing I find very helpful is to have access to fellow agilistas who can call on for a few minutes to explain what I'm trying to explain, the cool uncle syndrome. Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that, Alistair? I'm not sure what you mean there.
In your pocket, Alistair, or something, do you? Are they...
What I mean is, we as a community, we all have similar challenges. As Kirsty said, the PM that is difficult to work with. We've all, and we talk about these things, and if you've attended enough of these amazing meetups, you start to hear themes over and over again. Sometimes when you're trying to explain something to somebody, if you're there, you're the dad kind of thing, or you're the you're the relative, the close relative who's there every day, people start to tune you out. It's just a natural thing that we do. This is what I mean by the cool uncle, is that if I want my kids to hear something, I get the uncle or the aunt to say it to them, and they just go, man, you can't believe, oh dad, look, we're going to do this, and I'm going like, oh cool, that's a really good idea that they had that I told them about earlier. And it just helps so that they see that there are other perspectives, and it sort of comes from that the book I suggested to Brianna there, which is when we're trying to influence people, there are many levers that we have that we can use, and social proof is one of them, and that's a very powerful one. And to say, hey, look, guys, you know, this has been going on for more than 20 years. This has been going on X, Y, Z, and so on. The Dutch uncle, brilliant. So that's what I mean. Does that make sense, David? Does it? And I just find if we can help each other, we can then leverage it. And I find, you know, there's a couple of folks that you can just say, hey, you know, I know you're not getting this, but I know somebody who is an expert they do Agile, and they are also, you know, an engineer or a coder. I mean, I've never coded in my life, so if I want to talk to somebody, I need to bring somebody in who has done some coding to be able to communicate at that level. Come in for a few seconds, have a beer, have a chat, have a Zoom call, and then thanks very much, and we carry on.
I think it's this effect, right? Like when if you're watching after children that are not yours, and somehow they listen to you, right? And they don't listen to mom and dad because, you know, even though you say the same stuff, but and it's the same at work, right? If you're the project manager, you somehow you don't get listened to. But if you get someone else, and I think that again, that's where a coach could be good, because it's someone external, you know, and there might be more what's the word? More authority there in terms of
absolutely.
expertise, right?
But even with coaches, I mean, I found this in a couple of places where I've been, where even the designated coach loses their impact quite quickly.
Yeah.
But they are more impactful if they bring in an outsider.
Exactly.
I call it. Somebody mentioned Cool Uncle, which I like. It's a lot more visual, but I always refer to them as the out-of-town expert with the briefcase. This is, you know, the person who, you know, who is this person? You can big them up like crazy and tell everybody how amazing they are. Oh my goodness, this guy is coming to talk to us, or this gal is coming to talk to us, and then they come in and they say exactly what you've told them to say, and everyone goes, oh, this is great. You know, Alistair, why don't you tell us that? And I go, I know, right? This is why I got the guy in, because he's awesome. It's just a technique.
Yeah, I like it.
Fine. That's a really good idea. We could maybe do exchanges where we just sort of do that. That's useful. I mean, my method is normally just shouting really loudly at people, stamping my feet, and
eventually it comes in, is it?
Yeah, I normally throw Mary Poppendick's Lean Software Development book at people, and that obviously really makes
literally
on side and working the way I want them to do. It's 5 minutes to 9. So, has anyone got any other last parting thoughts they'd like to say to David? Otherwise, I think we'll leave it there because we've had a great debate. Any parting thoughts?
Just a big thank you. It's been a very, very lovely session. Doesn't even feel like we had 2 hours, so we'd like to see more of it and more collaboration as well at the same time. Thanks for taking our time anyway.
That's
David,
awesome. Thank you very much.
I appreciate that, David.
Thank you, everyone. It was a great discussion, I thought. So,
thank you very much. And I'll post up something for the next session, and keep an eye on David's Meetup. They all just feel the same now that one's not in North Kidlington and the other one's in the middle of town.
Indeed, yes.
They feel the same, don't they? So, anyway.
Thanks,
okay,
Mike.
guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks, goodbye.